Hey everyone, welcome to the Awaken24 Podcast. It's me, Z. So what a show we got today. We'll be covering a few things that touch the soul of every cultivator and perhaps anyone who's dabbling in this fine art we call cultivation of the mind. But before that, we got the book plug. Yep, the book plug. Jiwu Tango, the sacred platform of celestial embodiment. It's the first volume, scroll number one of the three root methods, and it's available on Amazon, Kindle, and paperback. I wrote it. It's several volumes, 7 volumes actually, of over 37 years of cultivation methods that I realized, developed, and learned. So there's a lot to go through in those volumes, but the first one is available for you. And it's literally the root of everything else that's to come. Okay, so what can you expect in this? And all in the Jiwu Tangong cultivation texts, you can expect these three things: the reason for each method, the perspective for the method, and the method itself. There's no filler talk, no stories of personal experiences, just straight up practice. And this is the book I was looking for when I first started. I couldn't find anything outside in the world to reference whatever I was experiencing and doing. So I looked within and things unfolded. So it's a realized text, not some recycled offshoot of anything else. I'm plugging the book here because besides social media, I have no other means to tell people about it. It's all me doing this, and I know self-praise stinks. So I'm just gonna have to roll in the mud in order to get the word out. So bear with me. Thanks. All right, let's get to it. As the title states, psychic attacks, cultivation, and family life. Seeing clearly and well, we'll start unpacking with psychic attacks first and the energy draining of people and people energy drainers and our responsibility on how it affects us. And the problem begins with the belief that things like psychic attacks can overpower you, hijack your will and force you into decisions that are against your own well-being. And that belief removes accountability. It places the cause of your experience outside yourself. And while that can feel comforting to a degree, it's actually a reflection of an unclear mind. And yes, people can influence each other, and we do so all the time through emotion, speech, posture, tone, behavior. That's normal. But the extent to which another person affects you is entirely dependent on the clarity and stability of your own mind. So when a cultivator or someone dabbling in cultivation feels overwhelmed or controlled by people in their immediate environment, it doesn't mean that they're under attack. It just means that boundaries aren't being held. That's important. Feeling uncomfortable around others is rarely because of the other person. It sounds weird. It comes from not being clear on one's own standards, their limits, and cyclic sensory habits, the patterns which the six senses react and get pulled. It pulls you all over the place. And the idea of draining people, like people who drain others, is usually comes from allowing someone to take attention, emotional bandwidth, so to say, or time that you don't really want to afford to them. The exhaustion that follows has nothing to do with psychic interference. It has everything to do with not maintaining your own boundaries. And a lack of boundaries almost points back to unresolved insecurity. Almost. Kindness generally, it doesn't mean self-sacrifice. You can give attention without collapsing. You can be present without overextending yourself. Boundaries exist because you know how much you can give before it becomes a burden, and you respect that limit. So many people use the spiritual language like psychic attack or they're draining my energy to signal awareness while simultaneously positioning themselves as powerless. It becomes a way to seek validation while avoiding responsibility for their own actions and patterns. It's tough. I know I'm touching on a very, very, very touchy subject. The truth is simple, though. People influence each other constantly. Humans, animals, plants, all living beings do this naturally. The difference between a cultivator of the mind and one who does not cultivate is this, okay? The cultivator knows their cyclic sensory habits. and works with them deliberately. They move with purpose, clarity, and how they think, speak, and act. Very important. Someone who doesn't cultivate simply reacts. That's what we do. They're carried by the ebbs and flows of senses, emotions, believing that this is the only way things can be. So keeping your energy strong is not about protection, it's about clarity. It's about boundaries. It's about responsibility for your own mind. That's the real work. Let's clarify a little bit what psychic attack or psychic means. And we also need to look at what people actually mean when they use the word psychic, especially in phrases like exactly that, psychic attacks. So most people understand psychic to mean the ability to receive information without spoken words. It's like to transmit information without spoken words, mind to mind communication without speech. That's kind of a common definition. And from that perspective, a psychic attack would be a negative influence moving directly from one mind to another, intentionally causing harm or disruption. Framed that way, it becomes easy to assume that anyone who feels drained, overwhelming, emotionally intrusive must be attacking you psychically. This is where the misunderstanding begins. Okay. Influence does not automatically mean attack. Minds influence each other constantly through presence, emotion, tone, posture, behavior, whether anyone intends it or not. We're doing that all the time. So calling every uncomfortable influence a psychic attack collapses responsibility outward. Kind of just bypasses the real work of understanding how and why the mind becomes affected in the first place. So my point is simple. We can't conclude that every unpleasant experience is a psychic attack. It's like making it as if we had no control over what is happening. And that kind of thinking gives away your power. We always have we always do have the power to change how something is experienced. And that power is choice. You don't need spells. You don't need energetic shields. You could, but you don't. You don't need magical protection from other people. What you need are clear boundaries and mental fortitude to uphold them. That's very important. And this is exactly why cultivation itself is so important. Cultivation places accountability back onto the cultivator, forces the cultivator to see the causes of their experiences clearly rather than projecting them outward. And from that kind of clarity, you make a conscious, awakened choice either to accept what can be changed or to accept what will not change. There's things you just can't fix, right? And you do it without confusion or self deception. That's real strength. And that's the real cultivation. Looking inward, taking it all on you, and then seeing what is actually from you and what you're doing to influence it. So here's our perspectives check. I get this a lot. Um, you're a cultivator, you're practicing, and you have kids, you have work, you have a family, you have stress. And a common question I hear is, how do I practice when I have all these things, responsibilities, stresses of life, and all that? You have to apply the right perspective here. It's not that the world you've created gets in the way of practice, it's that you get in the way. Most people believe that cultivation only happens when you set aside a specific block of time. Yeah, that's true for certain methods, especially sitting practices or single-minded focus cultivation. You don't want a lot of influence around you to take your attention, right? But cultivation doesn't stop when you stand up and do stuff. They're contemplative practices, self-introspection practices, observance without grasping for things kind of practices. Cultivation is also the deliberate application of attention in daily life, making sure you're nourishing the right causes for the conditions you want to live within. If you feel stressed, that's your cue to investigate your perspective. How are you framing the situation? What are you adding emotionally? What are you wanting from it? What outcomes are you clinging to? That investigation is cultivation. It's not enough to say you must sit for 5 to 30 minutes a day or anywhere in between, or you're failing. That's ridiculous. Cultivation is not fixed. Use your immediate world as a mirror of the mind. Likes, dislikes, desires, resistance, all of these things reveal the seeds operating within you. So you got to question, investigate, remove or empower, and then repeat it. That's how cultivation continues within family life and responsibility. So here's one. How do I know if an experience is real or just mental projection? This is really good. So in truth, everything arises from the mind alone. Most of what we experience daily are self-imposed states. When a single-minded focus cultivation deepens, a buffer zone, so to say, begins to appear between sensory stimulation and mental construction. This buffer kind of marks the point before discrimination arises through the six senses. As this becomes clearer, you begin to recognize when you're making things up through sensory habit. But this is where the caution is required. You conceptualize that state or try to recreate it through memory or feeling. That's how it immediately begins to become imagination. So please listen to that carefully. And I'll give you an example. It's not as a model, but just an illustration, something to marker your mind. So while cultivating single-minded focus through Wuzhou method, it's the first of the three root methods of Jiwu Tango. I encountered another being who transmitted cultivation methods to me. There's no prior knowledge, no sensory activity, no conceptual framework within that situation. So during that experience, the ordinary activity of the senses was absent. After returning, sensory engagement resumed, so to say. So only afterward did contemplation happen, and one way to discern imagined from unimagined experiences is long-term cultivation of single-minded focus. So over time, you become intimately familiar with the physiological and emotional markers of sensory engagement, especially thinking. So I can only speak from what I've practiced, right? There's no shortcuts. You just practice to do it. You learn to know your mind, and in time, discernment develops naturally. And some experiences will feel deeply true. That's exactly when investigation must be the strongest. You have to really question fully, break down the causes, associations, and attachments to that experience. And this discernment only develops through inward cultivation. Chan or Zen, Wuzhou, single-minded focus, basically. And that's the work. That's pretty much really what we got to do. You know, the reason I'm doing the podcast is because of this Jiwo Tengong book, Sacred Platform of Celestial Embodiment. And there's 7 volumes. The first volume's out. And that's the reason I'm doing the podcast, is because when you have cultivation methods readily available, it's really important to have checks and balances of the mind. What's really, or what would really be going on in your mind while you're practicing. Now, I can't tell you exactly every single state you're going to experience while you're cultivating and while you're living a lifestyle of that. It's impossible. I can give you generalities. But because each person's mind is made up of various causes and conditions as to why they see the world the way they do and how they made themselves to be the way they see themselves as, well, your experiences of things are going to be complex. And no one can point exactly 100% what you're going to be experiencing and give you an answer as to, yes, this is definitely this state, and that's it. If you want a reference to just general states, you can look up the Surangama Sutra. I would advise using the Buddhist Text Translation Society's translation under Master Xuan Hua. And you can find that in the 8th volume called the 50 Skanda Demon States. And doesn't mean that there's only 50 states. Just means 50 general states that, they mix and they combine with each other to create multiple experiences of various states. Like, to just give you a general framework of what are some of the ideas that a person would experience or notions that they would come up with and what those mean. So those are general things that Buddha spoke about. And that's a good space to be in, the Shurangama mind, basically. So look for that. I'll repeat it, the Shurangama Sutra, Volume 8, the 50 Skanda Demon States. Really good. Something I even go to every now and then since I received the book, the sutra, back in 2005. I always go back for referencing when I get states. Because you're a cultivator doesn't mean you know everything, but you might have an idea. So you want to check your idea against something that has some good merit and value. Hence why we have this type of podcast for cultivation and lifestyle within cultivation. Because after 37 years, and I'm not done cultivating, and I might receive more and more practices, and depends on the state, it depends on the experience, depends on the quote unquote level that a person is cultivating up to and beyond. Things change. But I compiled everything that I've developed and practiced and learned and realized into the Jewel Tangong scrolls. And it's important to have a commentary, a guideline. So I keep my guidelines very, very, what's the word here? General, because I don't know you. I don't know your mind. So I can't give you particular, you know, instructions as to how you're going to experience this and that. I can tell you, guard your mind, practice, and if you need reference, if you need any help, you can contact me. But I can also give you other references like Buddhist and Taoist sutras and texts, because that's a really good space to go from. Anyway, hope you enjoyed today's show. I know we unpacked a lot in a short period of time. If you have any questions, comments, or topic ideas, feel free to reach out, Eric at Awaken24.com. You can even check our website, awaken24.com/podcast, for the show notes, so you can have some reference for all this stuff. Anywho, peace.